All right, so today we're going to talk about what a police officer's duties are when they're in court for a case that gets subpoenaed in for court.
Drop the car now!
Put your hands up here on the car. Up on the car. No, don't put them in your pockets. Hands up on the car. There you go. Right there. This video was inspired by a comment that I received on another video by Blade in the Crowd 2. Thank you for commenting, Blade in the Crowd. He says, I'm working on a project for class and was wondering if you could possibly make a video or reply in a brief comment on the duties of police in court. I assume it changes on a case-by-case basis. How much influence do you have and what is required of you? Well, a police officer is a combination of kind of an expert witness and complainant when you go into court. So if I get subpoenaed into court, there's a few duties that I have before I go to court. One of them is I have to collect any evidence that the state's attorney's office asks for. Now, we have a clerk's department that normally gets all the paperwork together to ship off to court because the department keeps stacks of paperwork, but I also keep, my own copies of major cases. Also, any evidence that is in our evidence lockers, I have to go to the evidence technicians, get a hold of that evidence, sign for it, and sign it over to the state's attorney's office because there's really no other way for it to get there while maintaining chain of custody. The other thing that I have to do for court is I have to prepare for court. So if I know I have a court date coming up in a couple of days on a large case, I'm going to go read my report that I made for that case. So that way I'm up on it and I'll be able to testify on it if I have to. The other thing that is less of an issue with me where I'm at, and kind of a big thing though in smaller municipalities and more rural areas, is that it's the police officer's responsibility to get the witnesses or victims and make sure they make it to court. Now, where I'm at, state's attorney's office has state's attorney's investigators that go looking for witnesses and victims and try to get them into court and all of that. So it's less work for me to do, but that is a thing that a lot of police officers end up having to do. And then after all of that, like if they don't want any evidence out of the evidence lockers and they don't need any paperwork for me, and I've read my report, that's as prepared as I'm going to be for the case, all I have to do really is show up. I show up to court and I say, I'm here. And they go, okay, well, here's the case. You want to read it over? And I read it over. And then they say, well, what would you like done with this? And oftentimes ask our opinion, and because they want to know how dedicated we are to showing up 7 times for court. The same way they would for the victim of offense. They're going to ask if there's a complaining witness or complaining victim. They're going to ask them too because they want to make sure if we're going forward with this that people are going to show up to actually prosecute it. After that, you sit in the room and they prep you for court. They basically say, well, these are the questions that we're going to ask, and they want to hear your answers before you get up there so they know what other questions to ask. And to kind of flush out what any issues might be that weren't included in the report or other things I never would have thought to put in a report that they want to ask about. They want to know what the answers are going to be up front. And to make sure that we're ready, that we've read it and we've prepared for court. See, less of an issue now with me. They know that I'm prepared, but so it is. Now, once that's done, basically sitting there waiting for hours. Just hours and hours and hours and hours of waiting. You go to a homicide trial. The last homicide trial I was at, I got like 27 hours of overtime. All but 20 minutes of it was waiting to testify. Testified for like 20 minutes. First responding officer on the scene, asking what I saw and stuff, and then hours and 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 hours of waiting. And then once you testify, it's not like you just leave because they don't know. They may have to recall you. So you have to stay there the entire course of the trial. Now, in smaller cases, it's going to be less waiting. But you're still talking hours. I mean, it's very rare that I go to court for something I get subpoenaed for trial where I'm not going to be there at least a couple hours waiting to testify. So that's the long and the short of it. I wish there was more exciting stuff to talk about, but that's it. I mean, that's the exciting part of my job is the first 4 or 5 minutes of the call. And then after that, it's all downhill with paperwork and waiting from there. And that's not the stuff that they show on TV. So until next week, you guys be safe. Take care of each other. I hope that answered your question. I'd like to thank all the Patreon supporters and especially the shift supervisor level Patreon supporters that we have listed here. Your contributions are what allows free field training to continue on and become better.